Give me some sugar, baby.
Ah!
Chew on this!
Good one, Finn.
One question I get from time to time is there lore surrounding me? Do I have a family? Are there other characters? Where do I live? Well, to all of you lore fantasy junkies, these two shows must have been on your list for a long time for me to cover. And I want to cover their lore and my lore. Let's jump into it. Also, look at my amino. As an outside observer of Adventure Time, I found it interesting how it ended. I remember the finale being on and wanting to support it, even though I had zero idea of what was happening. It looked really serious for a show that starts off pretty wacky. We have a bombastic Finn and Princess Bubblegum work on a serum that should bring the dead back to life. However, all it does is turn them into zombies. I love the colors shown here in such a dead environment. It's a graveyard, but looks brighter than other shows' backgrounds, which have nothing to do with the dead.
My decorpsinator serum works, then all the dead candy people will look as young and healthy as you do.
Like all of the other archetypes that come after, Finn seems very naive, but ready to save and help the world. I've done this spiel a million times over, but did you know that this tree of crews working on essentially the same character shell doesn't start at Adventure Time? It starts at Flapjack, a character who's more similar to Finn than you think. When it comes to the society here, I was really invested in it, even if some of these characters we only see momentarily in this first episode. So as you see Princess Bubblegum, while the leader, of Candy Kingdom based off this episode, she also served as an entertaining character in her scientific pursuits. Although she'd take a large absence in the middle of the episode, I definitely enjoyed her mostly composed and well-spoken nature. She appeared regal, even if nothing about her personality-wise would imply so. I'm also surprised Jake takes such a back seat in this episode, because you would think for a main character, he'd be more prominent than he is in this episode.
Tonight, we are all going to have a slumber party!
What? Wait, what about the zombie?
Go ahead and start partying!
My princess, the undead!
Like a true leader, Princess Bubblegum puts her citizens' state of mind over the truth, which we can debate another time, and decides to keep their minds off this, safe and away from the graveyard, while her and Finn fix this disaster. It's actually a pretty good way to introduce the plot of this episode naturally. I have to say the designs of the characters, Finn and Bubblegum especially, it just looks a little weird. Too stiff maybe? It's hard to pinpoint without looking at later episodes. However, the designs don't ruin the enjoyment of these episodes. In fact, like with other shows like Gumball, Family Guy, or SpongeBob, these slightly less polished designs are just neat to look at in retrospect. So Finn learns that candy people explode when they're under a large amount of stress, which is why Princess Bubblegum didn't tell them. However, due to a
royal promise not to let anyone find out about the zombies,
Finn cannot tell anyone, not even his best bud Jake. Again, this episode really has this natural state of flow that gives different audiences what they'd want. If you want lore and world building, you get to see the Candy Kingdom and its residents. If you want to see relationships and character dynamics, it was interwoven with Finn and Princess Bubblegum, but also the minor relationships we'd see in this episode. If you wanted comedy, they place it between the albeit dialogue heavy story structure. For 3 minutes, it does a lot of things that many episodes can't even get fully done in 11 minutes. Because of Finn's royal promise, this dilemma creates tension between Jake and Finn, as Jake doesn't know why Finn is acting so irrational. We'll get to how Jake reacts more, once we talk about the beginning of 12 Forever. So Birthday Forever, the first episode of 12 Forever, starts off with a childish but wildly imaginative protagonist known as Reggie, celebrating her birthday with her best friend Todd and her brother Dustin, who is reluctantly there, and will continue to show this detached behavior for the rest of the episode.
Battlesnake Melissa would kill for some frosting. Todd, surrender your cake to Melissa.
They make it pretty clear that Reggie turning 12 doesn't change her love for toys and playing, and basically just being a big kid. I gotta say, one part I do enjoy here is the voice acting. It seems like everyone fits the role very naturally, and for other animated shows I've seen on Netflix, this is not always the case. So Reggie's mom, Judy, saves the best for last. Presents that aren't really wrapped, and hinted to be as convenient as...
Good thing we're having a garage sale tomorrow, otherwise there'd be no room for all of these.
Before we open the presents, we get Dustin's present, which should tell you everything about him.
Oh,
Oh, cool. A $20 gift card to Taco Chad's.
Yeah, there's like $7 left on it.
Just the sheer level of effort he puts here is amazing. I can already see the scenario here in my head. He's probably forced by his mother to get Reggie a present, and after 2 or 3 other worthless gifts, she just settles on this gift card, seeing as it was no true sacrifice for him. I wouldn't really call him unlikable in this episode, but he sure isn't here to make friends. So Reggie goes through the gifts to find clothes, a brush, deodorant. It's a clear whiplash to what makes her happy. It's clear that she's in no rush to grow up, and the disconnect with her mother is going to provide many arguments on this later on. This is a pivotal moment for both Judy and Reggie, as both of them start to realize that they don't really understand why the other person thinks the way that they do. Now, do you just expect them to talk it out and reach a common understanding? No. Never on episode 1. You gotta keep people coming back. Also, getting deodorant as a birthday present is like getting toothpaste as a birthday present. I'm fighting you, but here's the cherry on top.
Oh my gosh.
Why are you being so shy? Let's see it.
The party's over!
Reggie, what's going on?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's because you made her display a bra that she'll wear to her brother and best friend as if it were just nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, I'm no female, but getting something like that in front of your brother that doesn't care about you, and your best friend who's going through the male equivalent of these changes, that doesn't seem like the right chemistry to make things not awkward. I don't know about you, Judy, but I think you need a deodorant for sticking up the vibe here. Also, Judy, even though you had implied that the birthday would be
A little different.
you clearly wanted to hit a hard right into young adulthood pretty quickly. Nice clickbait. So they end up getting ready for the garage sale, and this is Kathy.
Ugh, this thing's seen better days.
Yikes. Looks like my ex-husband.
Kathy, you're bad.
She has a few clips here and there, but for the most part her character is very uninspired so far. Maybe later down the line there's an episode that dives into her character more and gives me more to work with, but I found her conversations with Judy here to be highly unnecessary. Just cut to Reggie figuring out that you'll be selling her toys. She obviously puts up a fuss, because Judy's little change is essentially changing her life dramatically within a day. However, to change things up a bit, we do get the highlight of Dustin's character.
What about Mr. Ratty?
What? Oh yeah, whatever. Just a piece of plastic. I don't even care about him. I don't even care about it. I'm not worried. Go, sell it. I don't care.
Just like with Mr. Gar, I feel like some of Dustin's best moments are going to be when he's flustered and can't default back into this normal act so smoothly. Unfortunately, that's the peak of Dustin's performance. It's all downhill from here. She looks through all the toys, as per her mother's so generous requests, and clearly can't throw any of them away. So she ends up taking them to Endless for storage, which makes you think, why didn't she do that at least in some capacity before? I mean, yeah, she didn't know that her mother was going to take her stuff, but if you had a spot where no one else can go, you're telling me you wouldn't stock things up there? Oh, and before, we get this lovely gem.
Hate this stupid thing and its stupid labels it spits out all stupid.
Did that make you feel better?
No.
Ooh, you get it, it's a label maker, so she doesn't like it because her mother is placing labels on her, so it's a representation of her mother. You see, I didn't get that until Reggie pointed it out. Anyway, back to Adventure Time.
I dare you to tell me the truth about what's going on in your mind. What were you and Bubblegum talking about when you were alone together?
As you see, Jake is not budging on this issue, leaving Finn to come up with ideas on the spot to distract the easily swayed, simple-thinking candy people, while at the same time, keeping his bro on a level of skepticism low enough to stop him from calling him out publicly and putting him in awkward situations like this. Each time he brings it up, it's clear that Finn would have to resort to bigger and bigger tactics. Also, if the royal promise is that Finn can't tell anyone about the zombies, what if Jake sees the zombies completely on his own accord, and understood why Finn, and by extension Princess Bubblegum, just couldn't tell anyone? Would it still be breaking a promise if they just found out on their own accord? I'm not saying I recommend this, it looks like Jake couldn't keep many secrets, and it's all about letting everyone know, which is something Finn originally wanted to do. So seeing Princess Bubblegum do this to Finn, and then Finn doing that exact same thing to Jake, that's just a great way to introduce variation. I want to highlight something else.
Does anyone else hear that?
What? No, Chet. Everybody wait. What noise? You mean this noise?
Other than the Candy's voice being amazing, the way that they introduced the background music for this eventual climax was so well done. I actually didn't realize that they introduced it in universe, and not just a song that's added from a composition standpoint, but a writing one. they do end up confronting the undead candy people. However, Finn comes up with not one, not three, but two creative ways to get rid of them. His temporary fix and permanent fix operate under the same premise. Disguise your strategy as a game for the people of the Candy Kingdom, and hope it goes well. The climax of this episode revolves around Finn and the others beating up the candy people as if they were piñatas. It's not the most elaborate action scene, but I did expect a little more from a show like this. I'm sure in other episodes they do go the extra mile. So by defeating the undead, and having all of that happen while no one was the wiser, Finn accidentally drops his promise. I suppose you can ask, what if Finn just said another story? It appears that Finn wouldn't just lie to Jake, but just hope that Jake understands that he couldn't tell him anything. I suppose you can ask, what if Finn just said another story? It appears that Finn wouldn't want to lie to Jake, but just hope that Jake understands that he couldn't tell him everything. We'll get to Jake's full reaction to all of this, once we realize the depths of what happens when you break a royal promise. Until then, back to 12 Forever. So to summarize these next few minutes, actually many more than a few minutes, it's actually just essentially getting accustomed to the endless, and it runs into two major concerns I have for the series, not just the episode. I'm actually glad I get to compare this to Adventure Time because I can kill two birds with one stone. Now while it's a no-brainer to agree that a reviewer shouldn't be biased, I feel like that's highly disingenuous to throw that around as a baseline standard, because to some level, I feel like many people who watch me, or other reviewers on this platform, like and or agree with them to some level, and this would indicate that they have a similar level of interest, aka a tiny bias. And that's because a bias is an inherently wrong thing to have. When people say reviewers shouldn't have a bias, the way I interpret the true meaning here is that a reviewer shouldn't go out of their way to overly love or hate something without looking at it as fair and objective as possible, and be self-aware of why people would or would not enjoy the media in the first place. So that brings me to the fantasy zany characters aspect. I'm well aware that in both Adventure Time and 12 Forever, there's these minor characters that show up, that give you this sense of community in this foreign land. I also understand that many of these characters may come back and appear many times throughout the series. My problem is that I can't tell you that I care for that aspect in either show, mainly because in the first episodes of both shows, I have no emotional connection to them. Keyword because of how they choose to introduce them. Consider my two problems a hot take, but for this first concern, I just feel like throwing me into the deep end of the pool and expecting me to push through the dry period of not having any connections to any of these characters is a great way for me to drop out of the series. You're giving me so many characters, some that are interesting, some that I may not see for a long time because of the sheer amount of them. I feel like a narrow approach would work here so much better. My second problem, probably even more egregious for the superfans of the show, is the art design. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but I've felt this way since the pilot that was on Cartoon Network that they took off, by the way. It just looks weird to me. It leaves me with this unpleasant feeling that I somewhat forget when watching the episodes to bear. It's not bad, but I can tell you very little of what this show offers is to appeal to someone who has interests like mine. If you're into the whole fantasy town full of zany characters with this imaginative kingdom aspect, this is hand-wrapped for you. That's not me. Even though I have these same issues with Adventure Time, it's actually to a lesser level. I can at least say I enjoy the character designs in Adventure Time, and I have a bigger interest in at least giving Adventure Time a shot. Anyway, Reggie throws the label maker, and it appears it'll come back later, and we get this gem.
Was I too hard on Reggie? She seems pretty upset about getting rid of her stuff.
Just pretty upset? Well, you're pretty ignorant. So Reggie ends up burying her toys, and they end up coming to life, because magic sand. I'd have more of a connection to this if I knew the toys, and was rooting for them to come to life. It just seems like any other toy coming to life scenario so far. Reggie buries her oldest toy, that brings her the most sentimental value, and apparently this toy, Brown Roger, does not like Todd. And this kind of goes over my head because I don't know why. Anyway, remember the label maker that was thrown into the purple goo? Well, it's back, and we'll finish that up once we finish up Adventure Time. Seeing as Finn has broken a royal promise, he must now face the consequences. The Royal Guardians grab Finn and Bubblegum, threatening to punish Finn through a trial of fire. You know, in hindsight, even though Finn shouldn't have told the secret to Jake, thus breaking the royal promise, even though she should be able to trust Finn, it wouldn't have hurt to at least mention the slight possibility of Finn being severely harmed if he breaks a royal promise. Maybe it's a part of the code of a royal promise to not tell people the consequences of a royal promise and operate on the trust that they don't need to know the consequences of breaking a royal promise to follow it. I don't know. Either way, we get to what Finn has to do to survive.
2 + 2. Solve it or die.
4.
And it's that type of wackiness right there that I hear a lot of praise about in season 1. Even though Finn was near death and there were tons of action, there was this wacky charm about the show that ties everything together in a near cohesive bow. I can totally see why this is enjoyable, and why many kids growing up would love to watch a show like this. In fact, as much as I do a lot of comparisons to what came after this show is a lot more wacky when it starts out than some of its contemporaries. Which makes sense.
All you had to say was that it was a royal secret. I know what's up.
Jake also understands in the end. This episode dodged a major bullet by doing so. Having Jake still upset would have made his character unlikable to many. So after saving the kingdom with many none the wiser and everyone understanding, Finn learns to break promises. Wow, he really doesn't actually. Finn learns not to break promises and to communicate better. Isn't that ironic? This was Slumber Party Panic. Now let's finish off 12 Forever.
Hey man, welcome to Atlas. Come join the party.
I can point out one positive in this 22-minute runtime: the fight was fleshed out, and I do appreciate that. While a label maker is a pretty cheesy thing to fight, I do applaud the effort given to make such an immobile object appear so dangerous and varied enough to be considered a threat. It was also neat to see the other characters chip in to fight, but I suppose like Adventure Time, many of them are simply just not equipped. I also noticed that Reggie's little weapon friend gets blasted off again but comes back when the story needs them. A little too on the nose there. However, for the side of good, as Reggie defeats the label maker, making it explode. Then they say goodbye in a pretty decent scene.
12, wait! I have your birthday present! It's really good! I painted a picture of us, I worked really hard on it! Oh, forget it!
Oh wait, did I forget to tell you about the running gag of this guy trying to assemble a gift? That's because there's nothing to add. They have to rope the family back into this, which gives us a scene with Dustin and Judy essentially tying up loose ends. It ends with Judy not really learning or accepting her daughter yet, but making an effort by going to a pizza place that she doesn't like. And that was Birthday Forever. Did Adventure Time start off well? Yes. Did 12 Forever start off well? Yes. Which do I like better so far? Adventure Time, by leaps and bounds. Maybe it's a shorter time with a more concise storytelling, but I wouldn't mind sitting down and finishing season 1. 12 Forever, I'm sorry, it just seems like a chore to finish binging. I mean, I'm still going to watch it, I'm a reviewer after all, and I hope my opinion changes and I can come on here and rave about a great episode, but for now, it's not for me. It kinda reminds me of my experience with Amphibia. You should check that out, or check out all of my Did This Start Off Well videos. Special thanks to the patrons of September, and until next time, take care. Alpha out.